I'm tired.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to the late morning program with Nam Ras, the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world. I am super excited and honored to introduce Garuda Prabhu here with us. Garuda Prabhu, thank you so much for joining us today. This is episode number 45, entitled Reconciling Controversial Statements in Srila Prabhupada's Books. Although we're going to discuss that, I'd also like to discuss your personal journey in spirituality and Krishna consciousness. So thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure and an honor, Nam Rasaji.
Thank you so much. Please let us know first, how did you come in contact with Krishna consciousness? We can start there.
Well, my gosh, what a story. Okay, I'll give you the short version, okay? If you want me to elaborate, I can.
Yes.
Well, basically at age 13, my parents put me in a private high school. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Both my parents are very cultured. They loved music and poetry and literature of all kinds. And my father was an MD, a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst. And my mother, a fine artist and a poet and a writer and so on. So I grew up with this constantly around the house. But I just felt something extra was missing. And I was always wondering about the big questions, you know. So I was put in this high school and I went to summer school to get a little head start. The headmaster invited me to this course on linguistics. Now, what 13-year-old knows what linguistics is? A lot of adults don't even know what linguistics is.
Right.
And so I soon enough learned what it's about. You know, it's about the structure of different languages, the history, the derivations, blah, blah, blah. You know, we were doing Hittite and Arabic and Hebrew. And so then he switched to South Asia and suddenly started talking about Sanskrit. Inexplicably, my ears kind of raised, and then he started talking about the Vedas and yoga texts. And it was almost kind of a sudden awakening of some kind. It's inexplicable, Nam Rasaji. I don't know what to say, because ever since that time, at age 13, I read, voraciously in Eastern texts and literature, and I sought out yoga centers in Washington, D.C. And back then, in the mid-'60s, immigration laws lifted for Indians.
Right.
And so all the teachers started coming over, including Prabhupada. But I went through a process of going through many different teachers before I found Prabhupada.
Oh, wow.
So I was so serious about practicing yoga, Nam Rasaji, that at age 15, I go to my parents and I ask them permission to drop out of high school.
Oh my gosh.
That's what they said. Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, here's a very educated family, believes in education, right? And so on, supports it and so on. But they also believed in me. And they said, well, but Graham, what will you do all day? I said, I'll be reading yoga philosophy and I'll be practicing yoga.
Wow.
They kind of looked at each other. Okay. Okay.
Really? Okay. Wow. That's huge.
I dropped out. They did say, what about college? I said, if college is supposed to happen, it will happen.
Wow.
That's the faith. I felt this was so much my path.
Right.
So I dropped out of high school, and I found that a year later, I felt like I needed formal training in philosophy and Sanskrit. So I applied to Johns Hopkins University. I got everything in. Johns Hopkins wrote me back, and of course, everything was snail mail back then.
Yeah.
A few days later, they said, Mr. Schweig, we've gotten all of your materials. but we don't have your high school diploma. Please send it along. I wrote back saying, I don't have a high school diploma.
Oh.
They said, this is Johns Hopkins University. We don't know what no high school diploma means. Okay.
Right.
So they said, get a high school diploma, maybe take a GED. Well, back then, I never heard of a GED. Back then, GEDs were not known.
Right.
So I looked into GED, and it turned out in Washington, D.C., you had to be 19 and a half to take the GED. So I said, I'm not going to wait 3.5 years to apply. I want to go now,
Yeah.
So they said, look, we don't care how you get a high school diploma, just get one. So I took them very seriously. And this is so accurate. This is not hyperbole. I was loosely associated with a kind of hippie free school after I dropped out. But I kind of was turned off to them because, the group would get together and read Hegel and pass around, marijuana.
Mm.
Later, I found out that actually it's probably easier to read Hegel on dope, but that's another story. But I just didn't like the all the drugs and stuff. I was a practicing yogi.
Yeah.
So I went to the headmaster and I said, Joel, do you guys give out high school diplomas? I mean, would you be willing to? He said, sure. And he took a pad of spiral bound paper, turned it on its side, pushed it toward me on the table. He said, draw one and I'll sign it. I said, you're kidding me, right? He said, no. I said, we are a registered entity. We're actually, a corporation. It was called New Educational Project back then. Right. And I drew one. This is to certify that Graham M. Schweig, is a graduate of the New Educational Project, Inc. And I put a place for Joel's name. And then he said, that looks pretty good. He said, put another line for a witness. I said, well, I can't be a witness of me.
Right.
He said, well, there's Fred upstairs. Fred? Who's Fred? And he called, Fred, come on down. And we heard nothing. And he called again and again. And finally we heard, right? I don't know what this guy was on. He comes stumbling down the stairs and he signs my diploma.
Wow.
I don't know what I was on. I was a yogi, practicing yogi, but I acted like I was on drugs because I actually sent that thing in.
Oh my goodness.
So, usually you hear from universities in March whether you got in, maybe April, but May is already too late, right? In the middle of June, I get a letter saying, congratulations, you've been admitted to Johns Hopkins.
Amazing.
I had my mother read it because I thought maybe I'm too much in the clouds,
Right.
So I went. So all the university students that I teach have a diploma I don't have.
Wow.
They can never believe it. I admit to them, I confess that I'm a high school dropout, and I don't know, you may want to drop the course. So anyway, I was then, very seriously practicing yoga in those days. And then when I was 18, I went to India for the first time with 5 other friends. They were kind of into other things,
Yeah.
which I won't mention, other teachers, gurus, paths. But I had been reading many versions of the Bhagavad Gita. And I said, this is my path. The Bhagavad Gita is my path. So, in fact, I still have some of those previous versions I read up on my shelf for comparative purposes. But I went to India, and it turns out that I actually lost all 5 friends. That's a long story, which I won't get into. So there I am on my own in New Delhi, I felt I had to go to Vrndavan. So there I am in the summer going on a train from Delhi to Mathura. And the train was so crowded, I didn't have to hold on to anything. It was so crowded. I think I was in third class non-AC, but it was so crowded. And by the way, back then I was in my thin stage. This is my fat stage. I was so thin. When I turned to the side, you could barely see me. I mean, I was really thin. Okay.
Right.
I weighed actually 108. And so that's why I didn't get drafted. But anyway.
Oh, wow.
So I speak to someone who's basically, holding me up. I said, sir, do you speak English? He said, yes, I speak English. I said, is it always so crowded on this train? He said, no, this is Janmashtami Eve.
Oh
I
my
said,
gosh.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
Right.
I didn't know what that meant. He said, this is the holiest day of the year. We're all traveling to Vrndavan to celebrate Krishna's birth. I said, wow, fantastic. I took it as special at the time. So this is my first trip to Vrndavan on Janmashtami with my friends lost. And there I am alone at this point, I'm 19. My birthday had occurred. So I'm 19 at this point. And I'm traveling to Vrndavan. Anyway, I got tangled up with a yogi in Vrndavan, traveled with him for about a month and a half after that, going through sunstroke and just being exhausted and so on. Many stories, which we're skipping now. Okay.
Right.
So skip forward. I come back to the US. I realize that 3 blocks down from where I'm living is a Krishna temple. 3 blocks, I mean, I was living on Reed Street and they were on Cathedral Avenue by the Washington Monument in Baltimore. So I decided to walk down there. Now, I have to tell you, while I was in Vrndavan, I had extremely long hair and a very long beard. Okay. The guru to whom I was sort of tethered at the time, told me he will initiate me if I shave it all off. I said, this is once in a lifetime. Of course I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Who cares about hair, And I said, but you want the little ponytail, right? Because I knew that. He said, it doesn't matter. Well, that disturbed me that it didn't matter. I said,
Right.
but I'm a devotee of Krishna. He said he understood. So I'm in Vrndavan with avalanches of hair falling. I mean, you can imagine the crowd gathering. First of all, there are no white people from the West in Vrndavan in 72.
Right. Wait, can I just say something?
Yeah.
You already identified as a devotee of Krishna at this point?
Oh, yes. Oh, because of Bhagavad Gita. Oh, yeah. I mean, Bhagavad
because of
Gita.
Bhagavad Gita. Got it.
This was already my,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I was already convinced. And even though I had Prabhupada's Gita on my shelf, I hadn't read it yet. That's the funny thing. I hadn't read it yet. My sister was actually the one who got the book distributed to her, and she came up and she saw me once at that time back in the day, and she said, "Look, I'm not into this stuff. I know you are, so here."
Right.
So that's how I got Prabhupada. I still have that original Gita.
Oh, wonderful. So you were saying about the hair.
So the hair. So I'm getting, I mean, there are no fewer than 50 people below, on the street watching this drama of avalanches of long hair falling to the right. And then this barber, took out, the blade, and that scared me. I mean, no one spoke English. So I'm like trusting this guy, like,
Right by the neck, right.
And it's all water. There's no soap, it's just water. They didn't care about, so they're doing my whole head. And I told them to leave a shika. Okay.
Wow.
I didn't know the word shika at that time though. Anyway, I came back to the States and I show up looking like this.
Yeah.
So the devotee, young lady who opens the door, says, "Oh, Hari Bol." And I go, hi. And she said, what temple are you from, Prabhu? And I sort of am looking around thinking, well, I was around a lot of temples. And she said, where was that? And I said, Vrndavan. She said, oh, New Vrndavan. I said, I know of a New Delhi, but I don't know of a New Vrndavan.
Right.
Could we be talking about the same place? She said, Vrndavan? I said, in India, yes. She said, oh my God, let me get the temple president. So the temple president comes, and and so the rest is history. I mean,
Wow.
my last year at Johns Hopkins, I would run down in the middle of the night to go to Mangalarti to this small temple in an apartment, brownstone on Cathedral Avenue. And that's where it continued. Then I quit college. After 3 years, I dropped out. I did a lot of dropping out, but Namraji, you need to understand something about me. Every drop out is a drop in. Okay?
Right.
Okay, so I dropped out of high school, but I'm dropping in to yoga and the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
I dropped, into the college, and then I dropped out to join the ashram in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
The old Damodar was there, original
Right.
Damodar from 26 Second Avenue. And
Oh, I see.
Washington, D.C. was where I really sort of grew in devotional service. So
Right. And then when did you meet Srila Prabhupada? Because I saw you were on a morning walk or something. There's a picture of you with Srila Prabhupada. You were so you're like a really young kid in that picture.
Oh yeah. I was I was about 3 or 4 mentally, emotionally. That was my emotional age. But yeah,
Right.
I was probably 20, 21. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but that's in Mayapur.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I went on many morning walks with Prabhupada in Mayapur, and other places as well. But I first saw Prabhupada, wasn't able to get too close to him, in Henry Street in New York.
Oh, okay.
And we drove, a bunch of us from the temple, Baltimore Temple. We drove all night to be at the Henry Street Temple in time for Mangalarti. So you can imagine, now back then, we were young and foolish, so we were driving all night, just so excited to see Prabhupada. So we were awake and we were talking about Krishna Leela and different things, right? So now remember, back then we didn't have a lot of books. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Krishna book, we had Bhagavad Gita. The long version had just come out. The 72 Macmillan just come out.
Right.
But yeah, that's where I first saw Prabhupada. Yeah.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your academic, after you, I guess, after you became a grahastha and things like that. Then as you got older, you got into more academic arena, right?
Yes. Well, I happened to be in the Washington Temple. Rupanuga Prabhu was the GBC. He was a sannyasin at that time, but he was involved with the formation of the Bhaktivedanta Institute.
Okay.
I got kicked out of the Washington, D.C. temple by, not Damodar. Damodar had left and there was a new temple president. I got kicked out because I refused to distribute books by cheating people. There was a devotee who went around training people from LA how to do the change up.
Right.
And everyone was so excited about it. I said, no, I'm sorry. This will come back to kick us, And I said, and I'm not raised to be that way. This is not what I'm raised to do. I'm raised with good ethics.
Yeah.
And this is just against me. I'm not going to do it. So you know what? Back then, temples used to trade devotees,
Like baseball players or
something.
something.
Like slavery, it's like,
okay.
Look, I have one slave that, I think, but let me see how muscular your slave is. And the different.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So that's the way things used to be done,
Right.
So we were traded. My wife and I were traded to go to Philadelphia, where Ravindra Swarup was. Right. Now, by this time, I'm already twice initiated and so on. But So we're there in 1975 at Woodlawn Street. It's not where it is now, but it's the temple before then on Woodlawn Street, where Prabhupada came. And Ravindra Swarup was trying to finish his PhD. You know, all these devotees came with PhDs, or not all these, a few. Bhakti Swarup Damodar was finishing his PhD. Siddhaputta, I believe, finished his PhD already. Madhava had finished his PhD from Georgetown. Siddhaputta from Cornell, and Ravindra Swarup from Temple University. So it was understood that Prabhupada wanted an educational force, particularly with science.
Right.
But there was some talk about forming a Bhagavata college in Mayapur. So Ravindra Swarup was going to be in charge of that once he finished his doctorate. So he said, why don't you finish your BA and then come and be my first student at the Bhagavad College?
Yeah.
I said, wow, okay, you know, what the heck? Okay, so I found myself dropping back into college to finish my BA at American University. I did not return to Johns Hopkins. They didn't have what I wanted. There were professors at American that were right in the field of bhakti, right in the field of the Bhagavad Gita. That's what I wanted. So miraculously, I finished my year. While I was finishing my year, Prabhupada or someone canceled the whole idea of a Mayapur Bhagavad College.
Right.
I've never gotten that history straight. During 1975, the miraculous production of the Chaitanya Charitamrita was happening. One volume came out every 2 weeks. It was a miracle. So I lived across the street in the ashram. See, back then, everyone lived in the temples.
Right.
You did not live outside the temple. If you lived outside the temple, you were like not even a third-class citizen. You were like a 10th class citizen if you were even recognized at all, right? So everyone lived in temples back then. So we lived in the ashram across the street. And there was a devotee friend of mine. He and I would, see to it that our ashrams, our individual ashrams were settled. But then we would sneak out at night at 9:30 in the hallway while everyone was asleep. And we would read every volume of the CC that was coming out.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes we were so glued to it, we couldn't discipline ourselves to get off. We would say, look, when it comes to 10:30, we're going to stop. Well, there were nights where we went to 11, 11:30, 12. And then we'd be up, at 3:30 for Mangalarti.
Wow.
So these were the old days, I mean,
This
was so exciting. And then finally, I read the chapter, Adi Leela chapter 7, where Mahaprabhu Gauranga takes sannyas to convince the intellectual portion of society.
Right.
And I said, my gosh, here I am in the middle of finishing my BA, which now is no longer useful for Mayapur. Okay, so that was pulled out. But you know what? And then there's the Bhaktivedanta Institute that Prabhupada is forming. There's Bhakti Swarup Damodar. Ravindra is part of that, and Rupanuga. And I decided, what the heck? Let me see what. So I said, the PhD is the danda of the age,
Right.
not sannyas.
Yes.
And that's my realization. I got so excited. I said, let me apply to University of Pennsylvania and University of Chicago, the two best South Asian programs in the country.
Right.
And I was so nervous about it. You know what my statement of purpose said, Namrasa? It opens up saying, I am an initiated devotee of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, known as the Hare Krishna movement. In the first line, I figured, you know what? They don't accept that. I don't accept them. Those Ivy League, prestigious nobodies.
Right.
Little fanatical, right? But I just needed to know I would be accepted. Otherwise, I'm not going to go there, Well, little did I know, they both accepted me. They offered me scholarships. They
Oh my goodness.
offered me right into the doctoral program, not even accepting me for the master's, and then at which point to reapply. No, right into the doctoral program. Honestly, Nam Rasaji, at the time, I did not appreciate what I got offered then.
Yeah, I mean, huge.
So there I am on the way off to University of Chicago doctoral program. This is where Edward Dimmock is. Well, guess who wrote the foreword to the Bhagavad Gita?
Right.
Edward Dimmock. So there I am, in class with the fellow that wrote the foreword that Prabhupada so appreciated, which I am guilty for having it removed.
Really?
Oh, that's a story. Oh, yeah. Now that relates to the book, the history of the books and so on.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But that's quite I'm largely responsible for convincing that the BBT to remove that forward. And that's another story.
I'm noting it down just so when we do go into the book changes, I can ask about.
You may have to stay on me for that one, right? Okay. So we'll have to talk about that. But so then I'm at the University of Chicago. I go there with cleanly shaven head, kurta, tilak. I didn't wear a dhoti. I felt that was a little, I don't know, just a little much. So I went in pajama,
Right.
So I'm going through, halfway through my first year there. Rupanuga calls me up and said, Garuda, I don't think any devotee is ever going to do this. So you need to go to a name recognition. I said, University of Chicago is one of the top 10 schools in the country.
Yeah.
He said, but the populace doesn't know University of Chicago. You have to go to Harvard. I said, I just got into the doctoral program at university, and now you want me to apply to Harvard. He said, just get some degree from Harvard, Yeah. So I apply and I get in. So I drop out. So here we go again. There's Garuda dropping out and dropping into Harvard.
Wow.
At the master's degree level.
Okay.
Then I finished my master's degree and go back to the University of Chicago to complete my doctorate. But then the Matsya Project, the famous Matsya Project back then, the BBT with Gopi Paranadhana and Vidyananda and a few other devotees convinced me that I should lead the way into a Smithsonian-funded grant that would allow us to go to India and microfilm handwritten palm leaf manuscripts.
Wow.
Lo and behold, we got $150,000 back then. Do you know how much money that is now? That would be like $500,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. So suddenly, I'm leaving the University of Chicago to head up the research in India for the Smithsonian. And when I'm over there for a year, toward the end of my work in India, I realized I couldn't return to the University of Chicago because of politics. So I called up Harvard and I said, this is during the summer, already applications, everyone's on vacation. I call up my old professor at Harvard. I said, is there any way you can let me back into Harvard, even as a special student just taking courses for credit? He said, no, we'd be delighted to have you back. We'll form a special admissions committee to review your application.
Wow.
I never even got that much attention from my mother. I mean, my mother was a wonderful lady, and I had a wonderful experience being raised by my mother. But this was far and above. I mean, my God!
Wow.
And they admitted me into a third master's degree program. That's why I have 3 master's degrees.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I keep trying to sell 1 or 2 of them, on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or something like that. But anyway, but that's why I have an advanced master's degree, which you can only get after you have ministerial degrees. And you could get credit if I got into the doctoral program. I could apply all that to the doctoral program, which is what ended up happening. So I got my doctorate from Harvard in comparative religion with a specialization in, Krishna Bhakti studies, yoga philosophy, philosophical hermeneutics, and
Wow.
psychology of religion.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. I think that is a really good foundation for setting this conversation up. That you can kind of speak also from the academic side about different things that we're going to discuss. But let's get into what the title of this podcast was about. With a lot of devotees, were interested in this because I think a lot of devotees struggle with this. To be honest,
Yeah.
a lot of the controversial statements Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in his books or that he's just commenting on. So I think the first thing maybe we can talk about is which a lot of devotees kind of bring to my attention is that in the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, I believe it is, there's this idea or the statement of women being less intelligent. So can you kind of give your experience with this statement, how you've processed it and how you explain it to people, or whatever you want to, however you process it, I guess we can start there.
Sure. I need to preface my remarks. First of all, I can solve that problem right here and now. I mean, really, this has gone on too long, and
Right.
devotees have suffered with this for such a long time. But first, I want to preface my solution to an understanding of this, difficult issue by explaining that we devotees have an option of approaching our philosophy with a tamasa view, or a rajasa view, or a sattvika view. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. I won't go into particulars right now because we have a limited amount of time. But a tamasa view is a very narrow view. A rajasa view is open, is more open-minded, narrow-minded, open-minded, and sattvika is broad-minded, to use Prabhupada's term. Okay,
Right.
Now, many devotees will take a statement that Prabhupada makes and will not consider context or other similar or related statements. That would be tamasa understanding. When trying to take a statement and take it with other statements that Prabhupada has made, that would be there's more light now. Okay, that's light. Tamasa means dark. Rajasa means there's some light now coming through, right? It's very good.
Right.
Sattvika understanding takes a statement that has been made and understands it in light of the totality of our philosophy.
Right.
Okay. And it's very beautiful. It's very beautiful up there if we can help each other get there. Okay.
Yes.
Now, Prabhupada and scripture will talk about, women in their positions, Vedic society, and so on and so forth, and women being less intelligent. I think he's even joked a little bit about it, and so on and so forth. Well, let me explain this. That when Prabhupada makes the assertion, women are less intelligent than men, this cannot stand alone without the reverse corollary. First of all, let me explain what is being said in light of the seeking a sattvika understanding. Women are less intelligent than men in the ways that men tend to be intelligent. But the necessary corollary to that is men are less intelligent than women in the ways that women tend to be intelligent. Now, I was sitting there once with my dear sister, Vishaka Devi Dasi, who was asking me, how do you understand this? And I said, look, Vishaka, it's really easy. One of the several qualities of the feminine that is provided by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is medha, which means intelligence. So how is it that suddenly women are stupid when they're intelligent, according to the Gita? Medha means intelligent. But you see, buddhi is a little different than medha. And I described that medha means intelligent in a certain kind of way. And buddhi means intelligent in a certain other kind of way. So women have a different kind of intelligence. And we can see this. This is not, it's sort of counterintuitive. Why is it that women really know how to take care of children better than men? I mean, that's a generalization.
Right.
But we can see that that's the case. Look at primary education. Mostly women educate the children.
Yes.
Okay. Women have a special intelligence. And now in modern Western women's studies, it shows that women have their own kind of intelligence. But men have their own kind of intelligence. Look, my son got his doctorate in mathematics from Cornell.
Oh, wow.
Mostly there were men. But there was one woman. It doesn't mean that a woman can't take up the intelligent tasks of a man and vice versa.
Right.
My 5th grade teacher was a man, where most, teachers in my primary school were women. So we're making generalizations here. Women, this is why it takes a woman and a man to raise a little baby human. Have you seen those baby humans, the little chumps, baby humans, right? I think you have 1 or 2 of them over there.
I have 2, right? Yes.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Okay. It takes a man, ideally, a woman's intelligence and a man's intelligence to raise a human.
Mm.
And they each are endowed with a special intelligence. Medha for a woman, buddhi for a man.
So this is the way you explain. The issue that I face is that when you say when you have this explanation around it, then you're not necessarily taking Prabhupada's words as it is. I guess you're saying that you need to look at it in a specific way. Like if you're gonna look at it in a narrow way, then that's what you're gonna get. But if you look at it in a more mode of goodness way, then you will see it as within the context of a larger philosophy or whatever.
Framework. Yeah.
Framework. Right.
Philosophical framework. And and suddenly it becomes much more rational. I mean, if it's worth anything, the most intelligent, IQ, the intelligent quotient thing, if you accept that, is a woman in the world. She has a 205 or something like that. I mean, it's unbelievably high. I mean, it's ridiculously high. It's a woman. Right. Now, why isn't it you? You're a man. Why isn't it myself? I mean, come on, you dummy, and I'm a dummy, and there's a woman at the top. I mean, we have to make sure we're not making assertions and that we're not quoting Prabhupada in a way that will make us look irrational.
Right.
That's another problem. You see, now here's another aspect to this, Namrasaji. Prabhupada had a very particular kind of discourse. He would speak on relatively important topics in absolute ways. And that was his dramatic style of teaching. I know what that's like. Sometimes I come into the classroom to my students and I say, "You're all crazy." Okay, right? So you're all crazy. You're all nuts. Okay.
Right.
Now, some of them really are. Okay. But not all of them, right? So I'm making a generalization. I'm being careless intentionally. Why? For drama? To send a message home strongly? right? But admittedly, I'm using hyperbole. It's inaccurate. It's not true to the facts, but there's a message. Now, when I do this, if you're ever talking to me on the phone sometime, Namrasaji, and I get all hyperbolic on you and all that, you might as well just hang up. But when Prabhupada does it, he's doing it as an ambassador from the spiritual world. He's doing it as a representative of Krishna Bhakti, and he's trying to establish it and force us in a way. I know this sounds a little crazy. Prabhupada was a little Zen-like, a little bit of shock. Yeah. Let's shock these Westerners out of their Western, Eurocentric box. Let's make this make sense, drive it home. But Prabhupada said we should repeat the philosophy, yes, but we should not imitate him in the repetition of the philosophy. This is very subtle.
That is very subtle and important, yeah.
Prabhupada always said, preach according to your realization. I prefer the word teach. He used the word preach because that was the Christian word, and that's still used in Christian settings and homiletics and so on. But really, we're teachers. We're persons that share, and bhakti means to share.
Yeah.
So we're actually teachers and persons with whom we can, accept confidential thoughts, and we can offer confidential thoughts. What our experiences are in Krishna Bhakti. We can offer that to people. See, we have to be careful not to imitate Prabhupada. So you're a new devotee, and you come along, right?
Yeah.
I sit down next to you at a Sunday feast. You look innocent enough, right?
Yeah.
And I said, after I introduced myself, so Prabhupada is a pure devotee. He's a pure devotee. And you should follow him. You should surrender to him. You'll be liberated. Now, first of all, are these honest statements? Prabhupada is a pure devotee. Do you know what kind of being I would have to be to actually know and perceive Prabhupada as a pure devotee? Wow. I'd have to be one of the 6 Goswamis. Or, it's not an honest statement. Stay away from the word to be, the verb to be, the is word. It's very dangerous. Leave that to God. God can use the verb to be. This is more powerful. Prabhupada has changed my life. His teachings have moved me so much that I've devoted myself to his mission. Maybe I can show you a few things.
Right.
It's so much more powerful. Why? First of all, because it's true. It's genuine. To say Prabhupada is a Shakti Avesha avatar. Who are you to say what Prabhupada is and what Prabhupada is not? I don't know about you, Namrasaji, but I ain't anyone to say that.
Right.
We can say what our experience is. Prabhupada appears to me to fulfill the requirements and the attributes and the accomplishments of one of the most amazing acharyas in our line. Now, as an historian, I can say that he is one of the most amazing persons, even from a mundane viewpoint. Prabhupada is amazing.
Right.
Okay, historically. Now, because he's my guru, obviously I'm going to be a little biased, and people will know that.
Yeah.
But in the academic setting, I actually prove how Prabhupada is an extraordinary exponent of Krishna Bhakti tradition. So the academics can offer devotees particular tools that are powerful if used properly.
Right.
But academic or not, our understanding of Prabhupada's books requires dialogue among one another to lift one another up to the highest understanding.
You were speaking earlier about some other statements, and you said that there actually have been devotees who have left the movement from hearing such statements. Now,
Yes.
for example, the statements of rape, and also other statements have been made. Can you give us, like, are we supposed to take these statements as it is, or are we supposed to try to work out the subtle meaning behind them, or like that? Tell us a little bit about, first of all, that your experience in that.
Okay. I'm one of the very few devotees who are actually trained in the ancient Purvamimamsa process of interpretation or hermeneutics, or the very tools that the Goswamis themselves used in writing bhashya for our scriptures. I learned this from really masterful professors in this area. But even without those, we should take Prabhupada's words seriously, and we should not twist them. First of all, the process through which I think all devotees can go through is first one of personal absorption. Read what's in front of you, but honestly self-reflect on it. If you're uncomfortable about what is said, observe the discomfort. Don't like, oh, this is what Prabhupada said, it's right. Don't be dishonest, self-dishonest.
Right.
Realize that this is something I don't understand why Prabhupada has said this. Be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
The next thing to do is to bring it into dialogue with advanced devotees. Now, who is advanced? Well, anyone who lifts you up is advanced, at least at that moment. A devotee a few years ago said, I would like to accept you, Garuda Prabhu, as my Shiksha Guru. I said, look, let's take it on a sentence by sentence basis. When I say something stupid, don't accept me. When I say something really insightful and deep, accept me. Okay? So let's do it on a sentence by sentence basis. And then that's a deal. And we should. Pre-COVID handshake.
Right.
So we attain a deeper understanding, which moves into realization when we dialogue with devotees on these matters. And only after that can we be competent in presentation. So first, there's absorption, then there's dialogue, and then you can present. One has to go through this process.
I guess the reason people have issues with it is when the other devotees might use those statements for their own, to like bring themselves up. Like, for example, for the women thing, like the men may use that against women, that, oh, you are less intelligent, Prabhupada said it, so we're going to be, lorded over, I guess. They can use that to bring themselves up. And then in case of like other statements, then that's the issue. My point is that the issue is when we use those points against others.
Okay, that is a very serious matter, because it is destructive to do that. It is very destructive to do that. This is when we turn Shastra into Shastra. Okay?
Yes.
Scripture into weapons. And it's the difference between a long A and a short A.
Yes.
Respectively, right? This is very destructive, Namrasaji. And I've seen it. We're not here to use scripture against one another. This is not our process. We're here to elevate one another with Shastra and nourish one another. Two of the 6 exchanges that Rupa Goswami mentions in the Upateshamritam is, offering nourishment to one another. Yes, that could be taken as prasadam, foodstuffs, but it can be taken as anything that nourishes. So we're exchanging nourishing things, not harmful, discouraging things. Then that could move into the realm of aparada, which we easily translate as offense. But you know what aparada really means? I mean, it means pushing someone away from loving worship, discouraging someone from loving worship. That is aparad. Apa, away. Radha, worship, loving worship. So this is serious. And if I ever hear something like this going on in a class right in front of me, I'll immediately interrupt the speaker. I'm obnoxious that way.
Really?
I will stop them right in their footsteps. I don't allow that to happen in front of me. No, we only use the Shastra is to lift up. Yeah.
I want to add, if anyone wants to put any comments or questions, please put them in the comment section, and keep your your writing succinct so it'll fit on the screen when you ask. But yeah, this is a very interesting point you were making, Prabhu. What about, like, I understand that point about the women less intelligent thing, but what about other points? Like, for example, when they talk about, like, what could be racist statements that Srila Prabhupada made. How do we look at that? Like, or example, we didn't go to the moon, or I mean, some people, that's proven that we didn't, or some people prove this, they say that we did, or just perhaps even maybe some statements about the Holocaust or things like that. Like, I guess how do we not focus on those things, or how do we react to people who do focus on those things and try to cause issues within the devotee community by focusing on those things?
Right. Good question. First of all, we need to understand, and I'm writing something that will be published in one of the books I'm working on, but we need to understand that Prabhupada's statements can be categorized at three levels: essential teachings to Krishna bhakti, directly supportive teachings of Krishna bhakti, and peripheral statements that are unconsequential, really, ultimately. I mean, who the hell cares if we go to the moon or not? I mean, really. I mean, is that really that important to you? I know it's not that important to me. I mean, it doesn't change, what we're having for dinner tonight. You know what I mean?
Right.
It really doesn't work that way. The really important thing we have to do is to focus everything to appreciate and understand and illuminate Krishna bhakti, the ultimate message. Even Krishna says in the very last words he speaks to Arjuna in the Gita, chapter 18, verse 72, he says, have you heard this whole teaching, which is very complex, with thought focused on the single highest point? Ekagra, eka, single, agra, summit, the peak of a mountain. So we should always keep focused on the single highest point. When we give class, we should always bring it around to the single highest point, the highest and most essential teachings of Krishna bhakti.
Right. Without
doing that, then what is the point? And we should also speak on those things that we've realized. Speak about the things that we've actually, in a very concrete way, have realized and studied deeply. It's part of your bones, really. Now, there are some topics that I've not studied that deeply. For example, the statements that pertain to the evaluation of other cultures, which can sound racist, right? The talks about blacks. Even we Europeans, we're supposed to be Yavanas, and I mean, we don't get a good picture. We don't get a good rating there either, right? Okay, so it can appear very Indo-centric, and so on. But again, I just haven't pursued it. But there is a level of realizing what Prabhupada intended by it. And we have to go there. Now, the part about rape, that I have looked into very thoroughly. And I see advanced leading devotees squirm in their seats when they're trying to explain that. But it's not difficult.
Before you go into that, I want to talk about the statement you just made about intention. Like, how can we, like, I was talking to my wife about this earlier. Like, the farther we go away in generations from Srila Prabhupada, the more it will be unclear about what the intention was. Is that not right? Because you, for example, you met Prabhupada and you talked to him and you heard from him personally, and you can comment perhaps on his intention, although some would have an issue with that even. But when you go farther in time, then you can't comment on the intention.
Prabhupada said his books are his Vani.
Right.
It's got everything there.
Mm.
In fact, you know what, Anand Rasaji, I remember being in Mayapur in the first big festival and hearing Prabhupada morning and night speaking and going on morning walks with Prabhupada. I mean, and I remember being after Gora Purnima, I remember being so eager to return to the States even before we all went over to Vrndavan. Because I just wanted to dive into Prabhupada's books. I was so inspired by what he was speaking to go to what he has written.
Right.
Now, who would want to leave Prabhupada when you're with, right? But I had this I knew at that time that I would have a special relationship with Prabhupada's books. I didn't know I was going to go into the academic direction. Right. So, that was an awakening. That was another awakening for me. And I had a relationship with Prabhupada's books. So his intention is there. Now, how do we know about each other's intentions? Like, what about you right now, Nam Rasaji? What is your intention talking to Garuda Das? What is your evil underlying, intention? Now, here's the thing. Savai pung samparo dharmo yato bhakti ratokchije, right? This famous Bhagavatam verse. Ahaitoki apratiyata, ahaitoki, without motive.
Yeah. Okay,
so how do we become without motive while we're still in process in Krishna Bhakti? Okay, the irony is you can be without motive if you declare your motives. I always urge devotees to declare why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And ironically, by declaring your motives, you can reach a kind of motivelessness state. When motives are hidden, they take over. When motives are declared, everything is transparent. Wow. Everything is pure.
Right.
There's the irony. So devotees shouldn't hide away until they're pure devotees, come out of hiding. Oh, I'm without motive, guys. I'm good. No, it doesn't work that way. It works it has to do with transparency. Declare your motives. Right. And in this paradoxical way, everything is pure.
Before I interrupted you, you were going to make a point about you studied the rape issue and how some devotees they are not sure how to explain it or anything. So please continue. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah. Well, two leading devotees, I won't mention by name, it's not necessary, but one leading devotee explains why women like men who are expert at rape by resorting to Hollywood. Well, we see that in films all the time. And how he knows about that since he's a sannyasi, I have no idea. But this is ridiculous. Hollywood is not an authority on women's natures. Okay? So This is absurd. And then he resorted to divinity, who steals away Rukmini, and it's even there in Shastra. Again, this is a misapplication of Shastra. What Prabhupada was speaking of in that purport, it would have been helpful. Now remember, we talked earlier about Prabhupada's form of discourse. He can be dramatic.
Right.
So Prabhupada didn't say some women, okay, right?
Right.
Some women, but that's actually what he's talking about in light of the whole philosophy.
Mm.
And also that way it's not counter to experience, because you've met plenty of women who are not really like looking for men who are expert at rape. Also, it also makes all men out to be people who are not so expert at rape, and they're not so good. And the people who are expert at rape, they're better. I mean, the absurdity of it, right?
Right.
It's absurd. It takes women and men and just smashes their interrelations.
Mm.
Okay? But here's the thing. Prabhupada is speaking about very dark male-female interactions, which are there in this world. Let's face it, there are women who are very sick who want to be hurt, and there are men that want to hurt. And I don't need to, to give you examples. I mean, people can think of areas of society that really promote sick dealings between men and women. The purport prior to that one famous purport in the 4th canto speaks about sexual addiction. Well, Namrasaji, any addiction is very, very sick. Because if I have an alcoholic addiction or a sexual addiction or a drug addiction, what this means is I don't care about anything or anyone else. I need to get a fix. When I take drugs and I'm taking heroin or cocaine, I'm also hurting myself. When women have this idea about men, being sex objects and wanting to be treated like a sex object, this is also very sick. Prabhupada is speaking about a sexual addiction, about a very dark level of male-female relationships. Prabhupada in other places speaks about how a couple can be so sweet and like a little Lakshmi Narayan.
Right.
Okay? Now, Prabhupada rarely speaks about rape anywhere in the books. This is the most prominent place. But if a couple can be a little Lakshmi Narayan, then what role does rape have there? None. So we have to put it together. This is not like, I have seen
Sorry.
I have seen senior women struggle with, well, maybe I really do want to be raped. Maybe that's there and I don't know it. Or, oh my God, what is going on here? This is a misreading of Prabhupada's statement. He's not talking about you as a Vaishnavi. He's not even talking about many of my female colleagues whom I know in the university.
Yeah.
Or my female students. But, some women are sick. They are sick. They have a sickness.
Does when you have to deal with, like right now when I'm asking you, and I'm sure you've gotten these questions from other students about, these statements, does that decrease your, I wouldn't say faith in Prabhupada, does it make you question anything? Like, I'm sure people are questioning it. I mean, not you personally, but like other people who read it who are devotees, they can be like, oh, this is like, okay, you can explain it. Like Garuda Prabhu, you can explain it to me and I understand it. But when I deeply think about it, it could be like, it could hurt my faith in a sort of way.
It could. And in fact, the tamasa understanding of Prabhupada's statements, you come across a statement like that and it's like, what do I do with this? I mean, then you start thinking about yourself, like, I'm a man. Well, Maybe maybe I need to become more expert at rape. I don't know. I mean, is this what I is this? I mean, it's absurd, right?
Yeah.
But this is why a beginner, a novice, a kanishta needs to seek guidance in understanding these things.
That's a key.
Unfortunately, even some devotees who've been around for over 50 years are still struggling. They think that some kind of, well, Prabhupada's not using the word in the modern way, in the colonialist definition of rape, it wasn't quite as fierce, and the sannyasi is explaining, well, no woman likes, a wimpy man.
Yeah.
And here's a sannyasi explaining to me what women like. He's never had a relationship with a woman in his life.
Right.
He's explaining to me what a woman, right? This is absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah.
Prabhupada, in the simplest of terms, is explaining that there are dark, sick levels. When he's talking about the regulative principles, I mean, if you are at a dinner party and you take a little sip of wine,
Yeah.
I really don't think there's a problem there. But if you become addicted and you need to buy 20 bottles of wine and keep 20 bottles of wine on hand,
Right.
I'm going to get really concerned about you.
Mm.
Intoxication. I mean, look, sugar can be intoxicating and addictive too. In fact, it's considered to be more addictive than even heroin. And it's very bad, and it's bad. It's bad for you ultimately. And when you get to my age, you end up with diabetes and this and that and the other. It's not good. So you have to be careful with sugar.
Yeah.
Anything in excess, anything in Rajasa and Tamasa guna is going to cause problems, period. So we have the tools, Namrasaji. Prabhupada gave us the tools. But, you mentioned the idea of faith. When we read Prabhupada's books, it's not the same as reading, a book by Charles Dickens, or reading, more modern stuff. Let's say Harry Potter.
Right.
Okay, it's a wonderful imaginary world and this and that and the other. Fun. That's fun. Okay. But, if you go and read Harry Potter with a mindset like, this is stupid, this is not real, then why are you reading Harry Potter in the first place? If you're reading, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, I mean, it's not something that really happened, but it's based on some things probably in her life, little projection and so on. There's a message in there. You read it for the message. Now, when you read Prabhupada's books, why are we reading Prabhupada's books? To cultivate a life of Krishna bhakti.
Mm.
If for a while you read something that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. Put it on the shelf. Have faith that one day you will have some realization about it.
Mm.
That's the way to read Prabhupada's books. To read Prabhupada, and let's say there isn't a guide around that is available to help you understand and appreciate something, then put it on the shelf. I did that several times way back in the day, and it's amazing how I returned back to it with illumination. I understood it finally. This is a wonderful process, this Krishna bhakti.
So there's a few points there. That one that I want to hone in on first is that it's important to have a guide when you are reading the books, and if there isn't, then you shelve it and come back to it. That's really important. What was the second thing I was going to say? What I was going to say is that it's not like a normal book that you're reading like Harry Potter, but it's actually something spiritual that's going to reveal itself to you in time as your adhikar is increasing.
Yes, as you're ready.
As you're ready, correct, yeah.
Yes, this level of receptivity as we purify our hearts. The word used in the Bhakti Sutra is patra, which means a pot, right?
Right.
And we are, but if we have our pots filled up with all kinds of preconceptions and conditionings, then how much room is there for Krishna Bhakti? So we got to be busy emptying out that pot a little bit,
Right.
and make room, you know?
Yes.
So if this X piece of information goes into and mixes in with my Y conditioning, well, it just may not be the right time for me to understand something.
Right.
You know?
That's a huge point.
Yeah.
That's a huge point. So does that mean we have to, what does it mean to empty oneself in that way? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So we all come with sanskaras, conditionings. Now here's a point that devotees think, and I've heard leading devotees tell me, there is no love in this world. Now, sometimes Prabhupada says that.
Yeah.
But again, let's take it to the sattvika level, right? The uttama level. Doesn't mean you have to be an uttama bhakta. When we do deity worship at the temple, do you know you're stepping in a pure devotee's shoes, right? I mean, when all the beautiful ritual and this connection with the deity.
Yeah.
This is all pure devotee uttama stuff.
Yes.
Now, do we say, Namrasa, are you an uttama bhakta? Because we're not going to let you on the altar until you are. You have to sign a piece of paper. No, we don't do that. But our whole process is about stepping into uttama shoes, expecting uttama performance. And we do this by helping each other. Okay, we do this by helping each other, supporting one another. Suddenly, when it comes to the philosophy or teaching, suddenly we can just splatter, Madhyama and Kanishta understandings all over the place. No.
True.
No, this is not acceptable.
Right.
You have to be on. For example, if you asked me today, how do we understand these statements, these assertions by Prabhupada that make Prabhupada appear racist? I would say, I know what you're talking about, but I'm going to have to look into that more. This is not something I've looked into deeply.
Right.
So I'm not going to talk. I could talk about it some.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm not ready to. That kind of self-honesty is so important. Teach what you really know. It sounds like a truism, doesn't it? Yeah. But teach what you truly know. Don't teach what you don't know.
Right. Thank you for that honesty.
A young lady years ago told me that someone came through 26 Second Avenue, where I've spoken many times. A sannyasin came through, and he spent 30 minutes condemning homosex. 30 minutes. He abused the privilege of sitting on an asana with people wanting to hear about Krishna Bhakti. Condemning, first of all, homosex is a phrase that Prabhupada invented. There is no phrase like that in the English language. So that's imitation, first of all.
Right.
We already talked about that as no good. So that makes him look stupid. He's a Westerner, and he's saying homosex. Come on.
Right.
Second of all, is this what our philosophy does? Are we busy just going around condemning different types of people that we don't accept? Is that what we're about?
No.
Where was the Kripa Sindhu here? Where was the ocean of grace?
Right.
Where was even a Kripa Bindu? Where was a little drop of the stuff? It was a desert. Okay. And then third of all, is this how you represent Krishna Bhakti? How you represent ISKCON? This is shameful, Namrasaji. If I had been there in that audience and I heard him go on more than 1 minute on this I would have raised my hand and said, Swamiji, I'm going to leave unless you bring this around to Krishna Bhakti, because you're condemning a group of people that you probably don't know much about.
Right.
And even if you do, that is still, I'm questioning where you're going with this.
Right. I mean, for example, like you're in a Bhagavatam class and that canto, that purport comes up, Lord Brahma, and he's,
Okay.
And that whole comes up. How do you bring it back to Krishna Bhakti and you not focus on that purport that you're supposed to give a class on?
Oh, you must you must focus on that purport.
Right.
Because remember, when we're sitting on the asana, we're giving class, we're there to illuminate what is being said. So in effect, we first need to start out as exegetes. Okay, that is to say exegesis, to generate meanings directly out from the text.
I see.
Is so important. Okay,
right.
But then our job is to take that narrow section of all of thousands upon thousands of pages, tens of thousands of pages. We're now supposed to follow Krishna's instructions to Arjuna. Have you heard this whole teaching or this specific teaching in light of the single highest point?
Right.
That's our job as teachers of Krishna Bhakti.
That's
if
great.
Krishna Bhakti never comes up in your lecture, something is wrong.
That's a huge point. I mean, for people who are teaching Krishna consciousness, sharing Krishna consciousness.
If
always
Krishna
bring it back.
Bhakti, well, what if I at the university where we're teaching a literature course and all I presented were science books? Right. I mean, that's just I didn't sign up for this. No devotee signed up for mundane presentations of Krishna Bhakti.
Very huge point.
We're not here to talk about, merely
like social issues or anything like that.
Right. Now, you can bring up a social issue and show how to approach it.
How to approach it.
From a Krishna conscious point of view. And again, there you go. Right back to the single highest point, the ekagra. The ekagra.
This is amazing, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I'm going to look into the comments and see if we have any questions there, because I want to do that before we go into our next topic.
Sure.
But let's look at the questions here. Here's one. I'm going to share the ones that are directly related to what we were talking about.
Okay, sure.
Shamala, does the Shastra value buddhi more than meda? That point you were making earlier. If not, why are there so many statements about women being less intelligent than men, yet few, if any, statements that explain how men are less also intelligent than women in other ways?
Yes, good, very good. Well, first of all, I offer my pranams to Shyamala, whom I know. So good to hear her comment. Now, one way to understand and appreciate what Prabhupada was doing, and again, his form of discourse, we need to appreciate that Prabhupada was speaking as a sannyasin. He was also aware, and you can find this in parts of his books, he was aware or even self-conscious of the fact that his godbrothers were looking at him. He was already pushing the envelope with initiating women. He was already pushing the envelope with various, things that he instituted in ISKCON to be able to make the society of Krishna Bhakti more available to all persons. And he felt the burden of the expectations of where he came from, which was the Gaudiya month. So he was speaking as a monk, as a renunciate, and as someone who writes books and article chapters and all that kind of stuff, I always say, he or she. I always acknowledge that there are women out there. For a strict sannyasin, they're supposed to basically be in a man's world.
Yeah.
So that partially, one can partially understand why there's a focus or an emphasis, as Shyamala mentions there.
Mhm.
Medha is here and there throughout the books. It is not nearly around as buddhi, but buddhi, I think, is also meant to be a more universal term, whereas medha might be a little bit more of a specific term as it's applied. Interestingly enough, in Sanskrit, every word is gendered. It's either neutral, feminine, or masculine.
Right.
It might interest Shamala to know that even the word buddhi is in the feminine gender. How about them apples? Okay, and and there's a lot more. I had a student at Graduate Theological Union who I think is going to possibly work on her course paper on the feminine dimensions of the Gita. First of all, the word Gita is feminine. But every other place you find the word Gita, like the Gopi Gita or the
Brahmar Gita.
right, the Brahmar Gita, and the every other place, it's in the masculine gender, the short A at the end. Bhagavad Gita. It's very unusual. Well, Bhagavat is, of course, a masculine gender, referring to Krishna. Gita is feminine. So that's interesting, very subtle implications. So, and in the last verse, in the second chapter, puts Brahman in the feminine gender. Brahmi, spiritual energy of Brahman. It's very unusual. So there are these subtle things that need to be brought out, and more research needs to be done. And I invite Shamali to be part of that research. Whenever she's ready, she can give me a call.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one from Deva Madhava Prabhu. Please share some basic hermeneutic principles so that we can avoid canonizing everything Srila Prabhupada said in any context.
Okay. Well, okay. Okay. Okay, hermeneutical principles. Well, we've already done some of that. Okay. We've talked about you need to be able to recognize when Prabhupada is speaking about something that is essential to Krishna Bhakti. When something is statements that are supportive to Krishna Bhakti, and then peripheral things, going to the moon, not going to the moon. This is relatively peripheral. Doesn't change anything in Krishna Bhakti. The Goswamis never had to deal with going to the moon or not going to the moon. The 6 Goswamis. Every devotee lives at a certain time and will address possibly certain issues. Okay, social, external issues. But one thing the Gita teaches us is that this world will always be troubled. That's the symbol that Arjuna gives all of us. We'll always be, confounded by what's going on out in the battlefield of the material world. Now, okay, but going back to Deva Madhava's question, what hermeneutical principles? First of all, that the first thesis I ever wrote was for my first master's thesis when I dropped out of University of Chicago. Prabhupada saw that thesis. He was on his bed. He was sickly at that point. This was in the months leading up to his departure. But I had a couple of devotees insisted that I send my thesis to Prabhupada, and I didn't want to, because I didn't want to disrupt Prabhupada's translation. I didn't want him to be focusing on my little mundane things,
Right.
But it was called something like a hermeneutical study of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, way back in 1977. And Prabhupada told his secretary at that point, so he gave some very appreciative and inspiring words to get back to me. But here's the point. The Bhakti tradition, the Vedantic tradition, has very elaborate tools for understanding. We're already familiar a little bit with the basic modes of cognition, right? Pratyaksha pramana, Shabda pramana, and Anumana pramana are the 3 primary ones, but there are 6 more. And I won't belabor this now. So I'm disciplining myself. Okay, I hope you appreciate that, Namrasa. A lot of self-restraint is being applied right now. Okay, good. But then there are, to understand Vedantic bhashyas, there are all kinds of ways of weighing the evidence and the weight of statements made in the Shastras. And the Goswamis dealt with this. What makes a stronger argument? What makes a weaker argument? I try to give devotees a simple way of understanding it in terms of the trigunya. When a statement is narrowly construed without understanding it in other relative relevant statements or similar statements in the rest of the books, then you're still in this dark place of understanding. But if you do see it in this at this level, then it's a rajasa level of understanding. And then to gain an understanding of that singular statement in light of the whole of the philosophy is what we need to seek with one another by profuse reading and researching Prabhupada's books, and by our own development and realization in Krishna Bhakti itself. All those things need to be pursued to gain that highest understanding. So that's my simple, hermeneutic for devotees. Right. I don't see any need for devotees to get into the technical mimamsa, purva mimamsa aspects of philosophy that starts with the Jaimini Sutra, Prabhakara and Kumara Bhatta, commentators on the Jaimini Sutra, and the mimamsa laws of hermeneutics and so on. It's very complex.
Wow.
Very complex.
Very interesting topic, though.
Yeah. Now, Deva Madhava, wants to get, into heavy duty study of this, then I'll tell Deva Madhava, give me a call,
Okay, great. Yeah. Great. We have just a comment here from one of our supporters, Raghava Pandit Prabhu. To your earlier point, this is from Bhakti Vinod Thakur. The great reformers will always assert that they have come out not to destroy the old law, but to fulfill it.
Okay.
Very nice. Here's a question. Dhanavad Pranams Prabhu. It hurts me when the majority of ISKCON, he said, rejects evolution. What are your views?
Evolution is a complex subject. Now, I was on a doctoral dissertation committee at Oxford University. That's that little place over there across the puddle. Anyway, yeah. I was flown over to do a dissertation exam by a devotee. By the way, this is history. There's never been, I think, in the history of our Krishna Bhakti tradition, a devotee scholar examining a doctoral dissertation by a devotee, up-and-coming scholar. So I've done this several times at Oxford and at other universities. So this is really new. Devotees examining devotees, teaching devotees in the university setting. It's quite a new thing, right? So this one devotee, Janaki Ram, has written a whole book on how we can understand and appreciate what evolution can be, what aspects of evolution can be accepted, what can be rejected, how the interaction between science and a Krishna Bhakti can be a very fruitful dialogue. This is not my area of expertise, so I'd have to refer that very good inquiry to that discussion.
Sure. This is another question on the same line. How can we reconcile Prabhupada's cosmological statements? For example, the moon is a star, which contradicts modern scientific observation.
Right. Again, I'd like to ask you a personal question, Namrasaji.
Sure.
Do you read how to put your phone, the instruction manual of your phone? Do you read that for pleasure, or you're reading it in a utilitarian way?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Science is it's all about pratyaksha pramana. It's all about sensory perception. it will only accept things according to what can be perceived, either as things are blown up from microscopic levels or things are brought to us from a macro level. Okay, everything is being brought down to the range of the human senses. Now, when we talk about the Bhagavata, we're talking about writings about things, even in this phenomenal world, that are not, viewed through those means, through that means. It may engage pratyaksha pramana, but it's always going to have at its basis shabda pramana, revelation. So you don't go to the Bhagavatam to fix a broken leg. I really don't recommend it. Right. There's nothing in the Bhagavatam that's going to help you fix it. Now, how to fix your consciousness while you're dealing with a broken leg? Yeah, I would say so. But you don't. It's like those devotees who are fanatics. They will chant Hare Krishna. If they're sick and they're don't go on a respirator when you got COVID. Just chant Hare Krishna. Well, first of all, good luck chanting. While you need to be on a respirator. But the idea is that we're not. That's one of the offenses to the holy name, right? To go to the Mahamantra as if it were going to accomplish something material. Let's not go to the Bhagavatam, to the sacred texts, for to solve material issues, worldly issues, or even scientific issues. Leave that to the scientists. It's a different realm. Yes, there are overlappings. There can be an interesting dialogue, which I've seen actually happening with experts. That's marvelous. But, when I get on an airplane, I don't stop and ask the pilot, "Excuse me, sir, have you been reading Bhagavatam?" Because I don't really want to get on this plane.
Right.
You're flying the plane, but I'm sorry, the flight attendant, I'm going to have to get off the plane because the pilot is not absorbed in Krishna Bhakti, and I don't trust the pilot. Well, planes are not flown by, the one's absorption in Krishna Bhakti. They're flown by the machines. They almost self-fly themselves these days. I mean, by the instruments. They go by the instruments. So, there's a time to trust the instruments, and there's a time to trust the Bhagavatam. We have to know the difference. We have to know.
Very good point. Love that. Okay. Here is just a comment from Radhika Patel. Love it when motives are hidden. This is your quote. When motives are hidden, they take over. When motives are communicated / clear, they are transparent. Very good point that you made earlier.
Great.
Here's another.
This is so important. I suggest this to devotees when they sit down for meetings. Let's sit down. And even when there are differences, let's talk about your motives. And I want to talk about my motives and so on. It's the right way to start. Anyway, just throwing that in.
Right. Shamala's follow-up comment looks like, since the quotes about women negatively impact the faith of so many aspiring devotees, wouldn't it help to have footnotes or endnotes in the books themselves to make sure the statements are not misinterpreted? Uncle, this is a whole nother.
Okay. This is possibly segue.
Wait, but not yet. Not yet.
Okay, fine. We'll just respond to that question.
Yes. Go ahead.
Since, I know Shyamala. I love Shyamala. So,
yes.
I owe her some response here. Here's the thing, Shyamala. We are a Bhashya tradition. I don't know if there's enough room in a footnote or an endnote to be able to explain all these things, but they should be explained. The devotee output has been memoirs, lots of beautiful memoirs. Devotee output is on translation of texts. There's one devotee who just does nothing but translation, just translating like crazy. Other devotees will write maybe some philosophical things here and there, but no one has started the project of actually writing commentary on Prabhupada's commentary. This is what we do in the Bhakti tradition. Why the BBT, one of the jobs of the GBC, or I don't know, I'm not good with administrative stuff, but someone should be putting together a committee to write commentary on Prabhupada's commentary. This is what we do.
Acharyas did that previously.
And why are we stopping that?
Yeah.
Why
I
have
agree
we
with you.
stopped? We've written everything else. We've written, well, I'm at fault too. I mean, I'm writing books and I'm not doing, but in a sense I am, because even in Tamal Krishna Goswami's book, the last chapter that I wrote, the last chapter for that book, and I'm trying to have devotees understand and appreciate more about what the great gifts that Prabhupada gave us are meant for, how to understand them and appreciate them and apply them. But I'm speaking really right now. I mean, Shyamala's point is, in the books, there should be something. Well, with the books, there should be something. With the books.
Yes. Good point.
Years ago, the BBT in 2005 called me up, and they had a conference call and asked me, and this is when I was just finalizing a contract with HarperCollins for a translation of the Bhagavad Gita. They asked me, would I be able to write a 30-page booklet that would be shrink-wrapped along with Bhagavad Gita as it is, to help people get into this large, fat book.
Wow.
And I was working with Kalakanta. He was supposed to be my secretary in this. And I would go and meet with Kalakanta ji, and I was talking about how we need to bring out the really delicious wow statements, and how then the reader could go to them, and a guide of how to go through the Gita, which can get very complicated.
Yeah.
And so, but they cut it off. Inexplicably. They gave me no reason. I worked on it for a year, and they cut it off. I have no idea why. No one ever explained to me. But that was an idea that they thought of. That's a little bit in response to Shyamala's question. In other words, in such a booklet could have been an explanation of certain things that may be difficult to understand that Prabhupada said.
Wow.
There are opportunities
that's
to do this.
That's a huge disservice, I would say, that it wasn't, you weren't able to get that out.
I don't know why. Anyway, so I just reverted to working on my own, translation, which itself was done to be able to support Prabhupada's translation.
Right.
So I agree with Shyamala in principle. There's a desperate need for devotees to come out with mature, not immature explanations, like the kinds I've explained earlier. I mean, this sannyasi was referring to one of these famous actors. What was his name? He's known for his muscles. This is what women want. I said, how do you know what women want? That's not what women want. And Schwarzenegger, he was referring to Arnold. And the point is that he didn't know what he was talking about. Again, let us teach what we truly know. Don't overreach. Don't go into some area that you just know nothing about. It's just
very good point.
I won't do that. I'm not going to explain to you what the apparent racist statements. I have not done enough work on that yet.
Okay, let's look at another question. So you reject the idea of a misunderstanding of the word in an archaic form. I think there's a typo. For context of chapter is describing a couple's amorous relationship. I believe this is talking about the chapter about the rape, where the rape is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yes, first of all, if Prabhupada actually meant something softer than the way we understand the word rape currently, it's not obvious that he does. Secondly, it's actually quite obvious that Prabhupada knows that rape is something that is forced upon a woman, that is it's aggression, and it's a crime. He acknowledges that it's a crime. So Prabhupada is not naive about this. It's very clear. It's very clear. Now, there are some devotees that try to undo all of that and say, well, back in, British colonialism, they thought of rape as a kind of heroic thing, and a woman likes a man to take her away,
Right.
No. Mm-mm. No, it's very clear that Prabhupada is talking about sick relations, addictive personalities involved here. Yeah. Very clear.
Okay, great. Here's another one. We already discussed this. How to understand the sun is closer to the moon from Bhagavatam. We already discussed that. This is from Kapila, our friend. Fascinating. I felt this point about aparad was profound. What I would be interested in hearing about is why is it valuable to explain or to contextualize an approach rather than perhaps remove. Let's see.
An incendiary statement.
Yeah, I guess I got cut off somehow.
Okay, but I think I know where it was going, right?
Yeah, please comment on that.
Well, there have been some devotees who think some of these controversial statements should be removed from Prabhupada's books. But they were going to start throwing stuff out left and right. Oh, I don't like this. Namras, do you like this statement? No? Okay, we'll throw it out. Okay. And this statement over here, I don't like very much. So is it all right with you if I throw it out? Sure, why not, Garuda? Yeah, just throw it out. Just left and right, we'll be throwing out statements here and there that we don't happen to like, or it's not PC, whatever. That's not our duty as disciples. Our duty as disciples is to illuminate and to do it honestly. There are statements in Prabhupada's books that you will not find me repeating in my university settings or devotional settings. Right. I promise you, right? But I have to respect that Prabhupada said them and wrote them, and it's my job to understand the spiritual teacher. Right. Not to change him.
Good, really good point.
I'm the first person, along with so many others, that want to protect Prabhupada from criticism. I don't want to see Prabhupada criticized. Yeah. My gosh, it's painful.
Yeah.
But the way to combat that is through knowledge, not through violating Prabhupada's writings or to get fanatical and tell women that they all want to be raped.
Here's another question from Rupachandra Das. I teach in religious studies in a college. I don't give my students Prabhupada books as readings. This is because I don't want my students, most of whom identify with feminism and Afro movements like Black Lives Matter, to be distracted by the controversial statements in his books or even make offenses to him. What do you think of this? Do you think we should have more bridge books or commentaries on Bhagavatam that could accommodate modern college students? I believe we discussed a little bit about this, but if you want to make any comments on that.
Yeah. And Rupachandra Ji, of course, I know him. And after reading this comment, I think he's a demon. No, I'm just kidding. No, actually, I respect how, now he's a new professor.
Yeah.
He's obviously he's a bhakta. He wants to bring Krishna bhakti to his students, but he's not, he hasn't developed a way yet, or just a preference or whatever, of how to engage Prabhupada's books in the classroom. And you know what? That's fine. See, he's being honest. He's being real. So he'll do it another way. I have confidence. I know Rupachandra Ji. He's an inspired bhakta and also a professor. So he'll find a way. Now, I use Prabhupada's Gita, in the classroom. I've got it somewhere around here. During the pandemic, I go down to campus and I sell Prabhupada's Gitas right out of the back of my car. This must be similar to what a drug deal feels like. It's kind of like in the back parking lot, students are coming out with money and they're taking the product away. It's just a transcendental drug and not a mundane one. But in fact, it went on Vrndavan, a picture of the back of my car with a pile of Bhagavad Gitas. I've heard other devotees say that they can't figure out how to use Prabhupada's books in the classroom. I've heard that. You know, I'm not here to judge them. What I do appreciate is their honesty. This is so important that we're honest with ourselves and they're honest with our confidants. And, you know, possibly I could show devotees who are having difficulties in using Prabhupada's Gita, for example, in the classroom. I could show them how I do it, you know, and that may or may not help. So I don't condemn Rupa Chandraji at all in his stage right now where he just feels more comfortable presenting Krishna Bhakti through other means.
Right.
It's perfectly fine.
Here's a comment on it looks like Shamala's comment. The GBC voted for that, but BBT rejected it and didn't follow it because that would be relativizing Srila Prabhupada, and the interpretation of such statements are varied too. The best part of our philosophy and also the most dangerous part is that we accept an absolute spiritual authority. I believe he's commenting on the footnotes.
The footnote or endnote idea, that's right. Yes. It's there are all kinds of considerations here. Okay. When you start giving a footnote or an endnote to something, you know, how far do you do that? You know?
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that it would have to be an endnote because otherwise you're disrupting the pagination of the text. So if you want to keep adding endnotes, you could do that in production. Footnotes alter the pagination of the text and then mess up your index, and it's a mess. So endnotes would be the answer. Now, here's the thing. How many people go to endnotes? Not a lot of people. They ignore endnotes a lot of times.
Yeah.
I'm someone who loves reading endnotes. I don't know what it is. It's a sickness, I think. Actually, I had a professor at Harvard whose books were famous among us grad students back then. His books were thicker with endnotes than the actual text he wrote. We just thought it was the funniest thing ever, you know. But he had more endnotes than he did actual text. So that's not a good thing, really. My doctoral mentor said, look, if it's that important and it's that substantive, put it in the text. Okay. Now that's for my own writing. Now, Prabhupada wrote what he wrote. The best answer to this is commentary on Prabhupada's commentary. So, for example, you have the Interpreter's Bible. It's these huge volumes that go, you know, wide, I don't know, 12, 15 volumes. It's commentary on, you know, the Bible from a certain traditional perspective. This is really what we need, and this is what we are lacking heavily. We're lacking heavily. And more should be done about it. It really should. I'm hoping that Shamala's generation will do this. Since my generation, we're all kind of dying off and old, and I'm senile, and
You're not. No, you're not.
No, but you didn't know me before, you know, a year ago. I mean, I'm really much worse. Yeah.
Let's look at an appreciation here from Christopher Fiji. He's a friend of mine, and you know him as well.
Yes, I do.
Prabhu. Yes, I always appreciate Garuda Prabhu's wonderful example of scholarly seva. He is a dear mentor and friend and guide. I've told him he's the OG of scholars in our ISKCON family. Most of all, he's showing us that interpretation of Prabhupada's teachings and of the teachings, history, and culture of our tradition are profoundly necessary and beneficial services. We shouldn't be afraid of interpreting what Prabhupada said under the guidance of those who know how to do so. Very, very good point. I feel like I had an issue with that earlier, but hearing you speak, I feel like, I mean, you did this to me with the book edits as well. Like when I hear you speak on something and I'm not sure about an idea, you make it very clear, and I tend to agree.
Well, no, Russell, I don't think it's that I'm so clear. I think you're just gullible as hell, really. I mean, I mean, you really should do something about that. I mean, really.
Oh gosh.
I mean, truly. No, but you know what? But here, Namrasaji, I appreciate that comment a lot and appreciate his appreciations. But here's the thing: the word interpretation is a word that devotees often don't like, because it implies that I'm not accepting what's there, and I'm having to impose something on it. Now, I'll give you an example.
Exactly how I thought. That's exactly how I thought.
Yes, and this is a residue. I remember sitting with Satsarup back in the old days when he was writing the Lilamritam. So he would come up to Boston. I was still at Harvard forever, as I was up there for 13 years, and I sat down with him and I said, "So how are you going to interpret some of Prabhupada's actions?" He said, "I'm not going to interpret. There's no interpretation here." So we had a big friendly fight, and we always had wonderful discussions back in those days. And he was in the midst of researching Prabhupada's activities and his history and so on. And I talked to him about, I said, you can take interpretation in different ways. And we talked about that. And we worked through it. And interpretation can mean something very negative. It can mean that, I'm not accepting what you're saying, so I'm going to bring in a foreign meaning to it. But there's another level of understanding interpretation, which means that it's just cognitively what we all do. So we are, as a 20th century thinker talked about it, we are, receivers, transformers, and transmitters of symbols. We take in something. We can misinterpret, or misunderstand what another person has said. So really, interpretation is really closer to understanding. The meaning is understanding. Once we try to take in what someone says, then we kind of, filter it through our minds and our own experience and our own conditionings.
Yeah.
And so that is part of what interpretation means. And then we give it back. And we hopefully have done a good job. So that's why it's good. If you tell me something, then it's good for me to see if I can repeat to you what I've understood. And you'll either say, "No, Garuda, you're crazy. You haven't heard anything I've said."
Yeah.
"Oh, well, then we need to start over." So I did a misinterpretation. So, interpretation can be a semantic problem.
Yeah. That's really, really good. Okay. Okay, here's a follow-up from Kapila. Thank you. Perfectly understood and explained, but excellent deduction. Appreciate your point on this. There's a word limit on YouTube, hence the cutoff. That's why. But you deduced what he was saying. Thank you for that.
Okay, good. Good.
Okay.
Oh, don't skip over the stupid ones. I'm going to hear a couple of stupid questions, okay?
No, there's no stupid question. There's a lot of appreciation, but also, okay, let's look at this one. Srila Prabhupada made many comments describing the character of African Americans and Africans in most abominable ways based on their race and culture. This is by definition racist. Srila Prabhupada's personal conduct and the principles on which he built an institution are extraordinary. But when conveying personal opinions on race, these opinions were obviously bigoted and have caused great harm. I believe the damages from these statements will grow exponentially unless soberly and humbly it got cut off.
Okay.
If you can comment on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as I said earlier, I made a disclaimer that I haven't looked into this as deeply as I will and should at some point. One thing that, anyone who's been to India has seen dogs in the street. And, they're sort of freaked out, right? I mean, they're sort of, they're not like dogs like we know them here.
Right.
And that's because of the way dogs are treated there. Let me give you another example. a chicken. Do you ever think of a chicken as being a pet? No. Chickens are generally, we think of chickens being locked up in cages, squished too closely together, go through this factory farming of providing meals for people to eat these animals,
right,
in this dreadful condition, right? So they don't seem to have any character. But I know someone who had a chicken for a pet, and the thing was just adorable, right?
intelligent,
When love, what's that?
intelligent, actually,
Yes, yes.
right,
And you wouldn't think so because the little tiny head, the big fat body,
yeah,
right? In my case, I have the big head, the little body. So it's kind of counterintuitive. It may not work that way all the time. But the idea is here is a general principle of bhakti applied everywhere. When living beings are loved, they blossom. When human beings are oppressed, they act differently. Love brings out intelligence. Oppression destroys the spirit of any living being, including human beings. Africans were thought of as being, a culture worthy of enslaving. It certainly was that way in America. Also in other countries, and so the impression of Africans are in this dreadful condition. But given a love and nourishment in the way that human beings should have, then you can't really, call them a lesser race. Really, what's lesser is our treatment of other cultures. That's what is lesser. And this is as high as my understanding goes right now. So when we say that, Africans, are a lower birth, because we've made them a lower birth, just like the dog in the street in India. I never see dogs in my neighborhood looking like those dogs. Never, because they're not treated that way. We make races lesser. But humans are humans. When love is applied to all of any living beings, they thrive.
Yeah.
Just that simple principle. And that's bhakti. That is bhakti. And there are no lesser races with the eye of bhakti. There are no lesser races. There's only loving connection and nourishing.
Thank you. Here's a question from one of your students, I believe. Can we interpret away all the controversial statements in Prabhupada's books? Is there a point when we have to come to terms with the idea that Prabhupada may be wrong or misinformed on some issues that are peripheral to Krishna Bhakti?
Excuse me. Yes. Thank you, Premananda Vilas. Explained away. Okay, now I'm not suggesting that we explain away.
I think he said interpret away.
Oh, interpret away.
Yes.
Okay. Same, to me, it's same difference.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes,
fine. But so interpret away. The idea of interpretation would be for further illumination of what's being said. That would be the ideal of interpretation. But yes, the pure devotee, is thought of as someone who's infallible, cannot make mistakes, and so on. Let me put it this way. When my kids were young, okay, Namras, you've got a young kid, right? Well, how old's your kid?
My oldest is going to turn 3 next month.
That's your oldest is 3?
Yeah.
Well, that's pathetic. I mean, that's only 3 years old. Okay. Now when you look at your 3-year-old, when your 3-year-old drops a spoon, is that the same as when you drop the spoon? Your a far more advanced human being. At least I don't know you that well, but I'm assuming you're a little bit beyond the 3-year-old. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So when you drop the spoon, that is different than a 3-year-old dropping the spoon. There are different reasons why you drop a spoon as opposed to the 3-year-old dropping the spoon. When a pure devotee makes a mistake, it's infused with a different energy than when I make a mistake. That's the point. So let's not mistake, pun intended, let's not mistake what a mistake is when a mistake occurs with this person or that person. There are different levels of a so-called mistake. To take something in the wrong way. Okay? So, that said, yes, I have no problem taking the peripheral statements that Prabhupada makes, where he clearly at times is even experimenting. He's even trying things out, you know? Right. I have no problem, but there are no mistakes in the essential teachings. That's the point. And that's what we go for. That's what we go to Prabhupada for. Okay? If you really want to learn about cultures, then become an anthropologist, for heaven's sake. You know, an historical anthropologist, and set the record straight about races and racism and so on. Once Prabhupada, a godbrother of mine, approached Prabhupada and said, I want to write a book on bhakti psychology. Prabhupada said, oh. He said, what are your qualifications? You see, he expected something like a PhD in psychology. If you're going to talk psychology, then now, Prabhupada didn't have PhDs in all these areas that he spoke in.
Yeah.
He'll be the first one to tell you he's not an expert anthropologist. But then you see, it goes the other way. I get criticisms. Garuda, how can you, write things that are different than what your spiritual master has written, or it adds on to what your spiritual master has done, and so on. You're an aparadi, you're a guru aparadi. Our whole tradition is based on the shuka beak, the mango. Make it sweeter. Prabhupada's books may not be the sweetest things for everyone. I've had second generation devotees tell me that they even found my books extremely helpful in their relationship with Prabhupada's books.
Right.
And that's true for other devotees who've written books. There's no shame in that.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's not only okay, I think it might be necessary. So there's no, interpreting away. There is just more and more illumination. It's kind of like this. When there's something controversial, we shouldn't just run away from it or try to make like it's not there. It's like if you and I, Namras, are getting into an argument right now, which, by the way, I would love to do. But anyway, you may not be up for it. But an argument may precipitate deeper understanding between us.
Totally.
I mean, in fact, Arjuna more or less argues with Krishna when he's pouring his heart out to Krishna. He even calls Krishna Madhusudana, which is an epithet meaning slayer of the demon Madhu, implying you slay demons. You don't slay people you love, and you're asking me to do that.
Right.
How can you do so much meaning in that epithet?
Beautiful.
How can you have me slay people I love and revere? You don't even do that. You're asking me to do something that you don't even do as the supreme. Now, what sense does that make? I think it's a damn good argument, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
That's right.
Wonderful.
No, we're here to further, and just like a tree, do you plant a tree in your front yard and then next year you come out and you scold the tree for growing? Who does that?
Let's look at another question here. How do we make sense of some devotees who tend to be more liberal or conservative? In other words, can there be more than one valid interpretation about Srila Prabhupada's statements? Very good question.
Well, I hate liberals and I hate conservatives, honestly. I mean, I think they're just on the duality spectrum, you know. No, kidding aside, there is room for dialogue. You know, what is more important than a conservative position or a liberal, so-called conservative position or so-called liberal position? These are terms that are often used in politics, but I've heard them applied plenty of times in ISKCON. But what's more important is not the position that you have. What's more important is the dialogue that you can sustain. It's the discussion. It's not being stubbornly holding to a liberal position. And I don't want to, you know, you're a conservative, Namras. No, I don't want to talk to you. I'm a liberal, and I'm, you know, so I'm not even liberal enough to engage in dialogue. Our whole tradition's based on dialogue. The whole Bhagavatam is a dialogue. The whole Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue. And we're not going to dialogue? Now, what's with that? Our tradition's all about dialogue. It's more important than having this or that position.
Right.
I mean, we could get a little Hegelian here. I know I said earlier it's better to be on a drug while you're reading Hegel, but there is the Hegelian synthesis: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Right.
The synthesis comes about from dialogue. We are about dialogue. If we remain isolated from one another, we refuse to communicate with one another, to enter into dialogue, this is not bhakti. Then it doesn't matter what your position is. It doesn't matter. You're isolated. You're alone. That's not bhakti. Sankirtan. You're taking the upasarga or prefix of Sankirtan. You're lobbing off the sum. Well, you're having kirtan by yourself? Well, I suppose you can do that. You can chant away and so on. That's fine. But really, we are meant to do it congregationally. We're meant to do it together. And contained in that concept is dialogue. Dharmyang samvadam, sacred dialogue, was the way Sanjaya describes the dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna.
Yeah.
Machita magata prana bodhayanta parasparam. Because in our different understandings, we will enlighten one another. Bodhayanta parasparam. Bodhayanta is a causative, which means I will cause you to be enlightened, and you will cause me to be enlightened. Parasparam. That's our tradition. So I don't know what that means to simply hold this position or this view and that view. There is no such thing in bhakti. There's dialogue or there's no dialogue. There's dialogue and there's bhakti. There's no dialogue, then that's isolation, moving away from bhakti.
Great point. Wow. From Hare Krishna, this is Prabhavati Dasi. Thank you so much for this podcast. I personally think that my relationship and understanding of Srila Prabhupada's words would have never been developed without the help or guidance of those who have had a close relationship with him. So yes, I think it is necessary for qualified devotees to help new generations to interpret and understand the path of devotion. Again, the word interpret comes up, and I think you explained it nicely that we shouldn't be shy or be afraid of that word. I mean, speaking personally, I was very suspicious of that word.
Yeah, okay.
like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
I understand that. But let me speak to that quickly.
Please. Yeah. Go. Yeah.
You know, I've seen second generation devotees with some really profound understandings. So, and I know that younger devotees may have a very great appreciation and reverence for devotees who, were with Prabhupada and experience things with Prabhupada. But use your own good sense. When any devotee affords you greater illumination on a difficult topic, then for that moment, she or he is your teacher. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to, again, engage in sharing with one another. Never give that up. Never give up that sharing, that dialogue.
Right.
So it isn't, soon Prabhupada's disciples will all be gone. Does that mean, well, now there's no more guidance? No, there is guidance in devotees who are seasoned, who are practiced, who are reading deeply into Prabhupada's books, who have attained levels of sattvika, right? Sattvika understanding of Prabhupada's statements. You'll know it because it'll either feel right or something won't feel quite right, so I have to keep pursuing it. Pay attention to that. Don't ignore that. Don't just accept authority, statements on the basis of authority. Oh, Garuda Prabhu is a Prabhupada disciple, so whatever he says is right. Well, just talk to my wife. She knows not every statement I make is right. Come on, we just had a discussion this morning about how my statements were not right. So, that, that's a good way to find. But seriously, in any devotee relationship, we can help correct one another. Premananda was on just earlier. He's offered corrections to me when I've been wrong on our discussion group. I don't tell him, how dare you? Maybe I should, but I don't as yet.
Yeah. Okay, this is one last question
Yes.
here. Is it possible that our own of bodily conception is what finds some of Srila Prabhupada's statements unpalatable?
Okay, good. Bodily conception means conditioning. Okay, it means the ways in which we have yet to attain transcendent levels of perception, understanding, realization, etc. Now, the simple response would be yes, but it's about appreciating, getting to the essence of what Prabhupada wants to give us. It's not always articulated, even in the way that we're used to having things articulated. So we have to not blame totally ourselves, but again, it's a matter of a relationship with Prabhupada's books. That's how we have a relationship with Prabhupada now, through his Vani. And his books, the books themselves are a form of vapu, interestingly, because they're physical, they're here, right? So, yes, but it's a dialogue. So as you interact with Prabhupada's Vani will reveal itself to you, and then you'll become more purified. The Vani will come to you in the ways that it miraculously should. Certain things you've read in the books, but you never realized what it said. And suddenly now you realize what it said. Wow, those are wonderful moments. So look for those moments. Keep delving into Prabhupada's words and see what happens. See what happens. Marvelous things happen. Marvelous.
Beautiful.
In delving into Prabhupada's words late at night when the Chaitanya Charitamritas were coming out, forced me to go and become an overeducated idiot, So, that's amazing things can happen with Prabhupada's words.
Yeah.
Amazing things.
There's one last comment I want to share here.
Yeah.
I suspect that you won't cover all the potential ground here in the time you have left, which is correct. Please, can you invite this Prabhu back soon to continue the discussion? Of course, of course. I really, really want to talk. I wanted to talk so much about the book changes because that's a topic that I because of you, I did a complete 180 on that topic from hearing your interview with His Holiness BG Nrsinga Maharaj that you did. And that was a fantastic interview. For those who don't know of that interview, please go look it up. I can also put it in the comments. I was not sure about that topic at all. And then when I heard you speak on it, it really made me think a lot and to kind of research a little bit about what you were saying. And I'd love to bring you back, Prabhu, to talk about that if you're willing to do that.
I'm willing if the price is right.
Well, we had 150 people watching this at one point, so there's a lot of hunger for hearing about these kind of topics that devotees really don't talk about so often. But from the deep within my heart, I really am so grateful for you to joining us here on the podcast, and we're really excited to bring you back. And thank you so much. I mean, you have some incredible wisdom to share with everyone, and I'm going to hear this again and try to glean some more from it. You know, it's hard to get it immediately from what you were saying, but to pick apart what you were saying and to actually listen again, I'm excited to do that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Namrasaji. It's been a sheer pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. We will do this again. I'm going to talk to Garuda Prabhu right after this. We'll schedule another session. We'll talk about the book changes in a really good way. We'll discuss it, beyond all the, offensiveness and things. Let's just look at it for what it is.
Sure.
And we can discuss that. So Garuda Prabhu, please stay on.
Will do.
I'm going to turn.
By the way, Namrasaji, if they do stay and visit that talk, I have many confessions to make.
Okay.
That devotees love confessions, right? So yes. I have confessions to make. Okay, so that'll be fun.
That'll be really fun. If you want to connect with Garuda Prabhu on Facebook, he goes by Facebook by Graham M. Schweig. You can find him on Facebook that way. So you can connect with him there. Send him a message if you have any questions or anything like that. But thank you everyone for listening. That's episode 45 of the Late Morning Program, and we'd love to please check out the other episodes. We have almost 50 episodes now. Wow. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day. Krishna, Hare Krishna.